Welcome back everybody to our Moonstruck tutorial series. So you will have now knit your rib, which is what I've done here on the second sock, and then I've also just done the first round of our chart because it's just a plain knit round, and then I'm going to explain to you what that stitch marker is in 1 second. But just what I wanted to say first of all is that you will have the basic sock pattern of my vanilla cream socks, which if you took out the lace pattern here, that's the sock that you've got. So you're using that as your template to work through the instructions, and then you will also have 2 PDF charts, one for the left sock and one for the right sock. This one that I've already completed is the right sock, so I'll just explain to you how you place your panel within your sock. So for the right sock, you actually start your chart at the beginning of your round. So if I bring the chart in here, so this is the right sock chart, and you can see it's 14 stitches, and that first stitch is a plain knit stitch. And that's deliberately done that way because then that gives us just a little bit of leeway on the sort of edge of your sock, so that when you come to pick up your gussets down here, you've got a little bit of sort of real estate, if you like. So for the right sock, as I've done here, what you will do is on the leg of your sock, you're going to work the chart at the beginning of the round. So you work these 14 stitches at the beginning of your round, and then you just knit all the rest of the stitches on that round, and then just carry on with the right sock all the way down in that manner. For the left sock, which is the one we're going to be doing now, and I did it this way around deliberately because that's kind of simpler. For the right sock, you know, at the start of the round, you work the chart and then you knit the rest of the stitches. Very straightforward. The left sock is slightly different because on the left sock, instead of being here on this side of the sock, the moons are going to be here, running down the other side, because they want to be on the outside of your leg when you're wearing them. So to place the moons on the left sock, if I bring this in here, I can explain to you what the stitch marker is. So this is the start of my round here, and what you will do is on that first round of your chart, which is a knit round, you can place a marker, and that will then tell you where you're going to work your chart. So the marker is placed in a slightly different place for each of your 3 sock sizes. So if you're knitting the size small, so that's the 56 stitch sock, what you're going to do is you will knit 14 and then place the marker and then knit all the way around. If you're knitting the medium size, which is the same as I'm knitting here, which is the 64 stitch, you will knit 18, place your marker, knit the rest of the way around. And if you're doing the size large, you're going to knit 22, place your marker, knit all the way around. And then what that marker is telling us is when we get to that marker, it's this section of stitches here that you will be working your chart on. So if I bring in the left sock chart, it's essentially the same chart, but if you look, what's happened is that plain knit round has swapped to this end, because this is the other side of your instep, what will be your instep. So you've still got 14 stitches, but we've moved the plain knit stitch to the end. So you should have, as a double check, you should have 14 stitches here after your marker. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. So that's how you will know that you've got your marker in the right place, because you've got 14 stitches after it, which is where we're going to work our chart. So for the left sock, we'll be knitting to the marker, slipping the marker, and then we work the chart here, and then you knit all the stitches on the rest of the round. So let's move that sock out of the way and just have a quick look at the chart. A lot of the stitches you will recognise already. SSK, yarn over, knit 2 together, knit through the back loop, knit front back. Probably you're very familiar with all of those. The ones you won't necessarily be familiar with will be the cluster stitch, a central double increase, and then this one which decreases 5 stitches to 1. So what I'm going to be doing is I will work through the chart, and I'm going to be showing you the rows that actually have these very particular stitches on. So that's row 2, row 4. I'm going to do row 12 as well, because that encompasses the SSKs, knit two togethers, yarn overs, and the knit front back. And then also row 14, which has got knit front backs, and then it's got that big decrease stitch. So that's the 4 rows I'll be showing you, and then I'll just be sort of working through the others, but not necessarily showing you those, because the others are, you know, it's your basic sort of stitches, lace stitches. So we need to get started. Now I'm using a little clicker to keep track of my rows. I really would suggest that you do that. So you can see I've done row 1 already, and I'm now ready to work row 2, which is the cluster stitch. And if you look at the sock here, the cluster stitch is, can you see this little line here? It's that stitch right there. So let's bring our sock in and let's get started. So first of all, I just need to knit to my marker, which is what we will be doing every single round. You know, you just knit straight to that marker. There we go. So now I'm just going to slip that marker, and we're now going to work our chart. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 knit stitches before that cluster stitch. So we need to knit 5. Okay, so we're now ready to work the cluster stitch, which is worked over 3 stitches. So what we're going to do is we're going to slip the next 3 stitches one at a time, purlwise, over to the right needle, like that. I'm now going to bring my yarn round to the front and pass them back without changing the orientation, so I'm going sort of through the back of the stitch there. I'm now going to, oh, do you know what? I've split that. I can sort that out when I get to it. So now I'm going to bring the yarn back to the back, and you can see now we've wrapped those stitches effectively. And now I'm going to knit them. So sort of snug up that yarn a little bit. So now I'm going to knit those stitches and do it quite sort of carefully. I'm just going to ignore that bit of yarn there because I caught it. There we go. There we go. It's gone now. So I've knit those 3 stitches now, and we've effectively wrapped those 3 stitches. Okay, we've clustered them together. I think that's why it's called a cluster. And now you can just knit to the end of the chart, and then you will just knit all the stitches on needle 2. So that's the cluster stitch here on round 2. What I'm now going to do is I will work through to the point of starting round 4, so that I can show you these sort of double decreases here and here, and then I can show you this central double increase. Okay, so I'm now on round 4, and actually what I'm just going to say is, I'm sure this was obvious to you, but I should have said this right at the beginning, that after I finished my cuff, I cut my contrast colour yarn, and then I started knitting with my main colour yarn for that first knit round where I placed the marker. Okay, so I'm now on round 4. I've worked up to the point of the stitch marker and I've slipped that. So the first thing I'm going to do is knit 3 stitches here. And we're now going to work, this symbol here is a knit 3 together. Now this can be a tricky stitch. What I find helps hugely, for me anyway, in working this stitch is if I just sort of loosen these 3 stitches a little bit. And the way that I do that is I put my needle through all 3 stitches like that and just give it a wiggle like this. Pull forward a tiny bit and give it a wiggle, and that just slackens off those 3 stitches, and then it makes it much easier for you then to go in and grab all 3 of those. So it's like a knit 2 together, but it's 3 stitches. But honestly, I found it really tricky doing a knit 3 together. just getting my needle into all 3 of those stitches. But by just loosening those stitches off a little bit like that, it just transforms it into really not a bother at all. So now what I'm going to do is just knit those stitches together. So do this quite carefully, and as you sort of wrap your yarn, keep hold of it and give it a nice sort of little tug as you're doing it, and that will avoid any risk of stitches slipping off. So just pull that through carefully. We've got it, and then off the needle. So that's our knit 3 together. So I'll bring my chart back in. I'm now going to do a yarn over, and now we're going to work this central double increase. So to do that, what I'm going to do is this next stitch I'm going to work into the back. So knit into the back, and then without taking it off the needle, I'm going to knit into the front. So normally you would knit it the other way, wouldn't you? You'd do a knit front and then back. This is the other way. I'm going into the back first and then knit into the front. So that's increased it by 1 stitch, but now we're going to increase it by another. So I've taken that off my needle, and what I'm going to do with my left hand needle, can you see this strand of yarn here that's coming down? I'm going to go underneath that, and then I'm going to knit into the back of that stitch. So again, what I've found makes this much easier is keeping my finger on these stitches on my right hand needle, because what you have to do is sort of bring your needle around like that. So I'm keeping my finger here to stop them flying off, and then go into the back of that stitch and then knit it. There we go. And that's our double increase. Do all the, if you know, this is it was a new stitch to me, and I just did it really slowly and carefully, and then you will get used to it. So next I'm going to do a yarn over, and now I'm going to do it's this one here. So when it leans to the right, it's knit 3 together. When this one leans to the left, it's a left leaning double decrease. So we're going to slip 1. You can see up here we're going to slip 1, we're going to SSK, and then we're going to pass slip stitch over. So we're going to slip 1 knitwise, we're going to SSK. So the way that I SSK is I slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, and then go through the sort of back loops of, well, yeah, you're going, well, you're not, you're going through the front loops, aren't you? You're going through the front loops of those, but then knitting through the back of them. And then complete that stitch. And now we need to pass that slip stitch over, and the slip stitch is right there. And again, what I do, if you keep a sort of nice firm grip on your yarn there, it stops that stitch that's on your right hand needle flying off. There we go. So that's our left leaning double decrease effectively. It's slip 1, SSK, pass slip stitch over. And now you can see, you know you're right, because you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches there. And we've got 4 stitches left on our needle, so we know we are all correct. Another little thing I do to check that everything's okay is when you've finished that section, if you've done sort of tricky things like we've just done, you can just double check your stitch count and make sure you've still got 14. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. We know we're good. And I think it's really worth doing that check of your stitch count at that point, because if it turned out to be wrong, I can now look back at my stitches and I can work out where I've gone wrong, and I've only got those few stitches to tink back if I need to. If we wait until we've done that plain knit round afterwards and then we find out that we're wrong, we've got to do more tinking. So it's really worth doing that little stitch count to double check. I actually do that after each of my lace sort of chart rows. So I can now just finish that round off by knitting the rest of the stitches, and I'm now going to work through to round 12, because these 2 rounds here of the lace stitches, it's just your basic lace stitches. So we've got yarn overs, we've got knit 2 togethers, we've got SSKs, and then this is a knit through the back loop. Likewise with this one, same thing, yarn overs, knit 2 togethers, SSKs, and then this one is the left double decrease that we've just done just now. So I will see you back at round 12. I just think it's worth going over the sort of basic lace stitches again, and also you can see what it's sort of looking like at that stage. So I will see you back in 1 minute. Okay, so I'm up to round 12 now. I've worked across to the marker, slipped it, and I'm ready to work round 12 of the chart right here. One thing I wanted to say to you actually at this stage is when you are working your plain knit rounds that are in between your lace rounds, I always work these stitches quite sort of slowly, because you might find that the stitches are sort of presented on your needle in a slightly different way to what you're used to, especially when you've worked these sort of complex stitches. So it's really worth just taking your time on the knit rounds in between, just to make sure you don't lose any stitches off the end of your needle. I never have, and I've never had to think back the whole time I've been doing this chart. That is partly because, you know, I'm really paying attention, I'm concentrating, but also because when I'm doing those knit rounds, I'm just doing it sort of quite slowly to make sure that nothing goes awry. So I'm on round 12 now here, so we're just going to be doing SSKs, yarn overs, and then we've got a knit through the back loop here in the centre. Now what happens at this point, and this is why I wanted to show you this round in particular, is that you can see up until this point on this right hand side of the chart, it's always been knit two together, so it's been right hand decreases. It's at this point here where it changes to left hand decreases on this side, and likewise here it was left hand and now it's right hand. So just be careful of that, because you might automatically think, oh yeah, I'm at the beginning, I'm doing I'm doing knit two togethers. You're not. Just pay attention to your symbols there. The way that I sort of read charts, if it's sort of a complex little row like this, where we've got lots of the same thing effectively going on, I just have a quick look at it and I just say it in my head. So it's SSK yarn over, SSK yarn over, SSK yarn over. So we've got 3 repeats of an SSK and a yarn over. So I'm going to do that little section first, and then I'll think about what's coming next. I never try to sort of memorize the whole sort of the whole chart here. I think you can get into all sorts of bother if you try and memorize too much. So I'm going to do an SSK, and then a yarn over, and again SSK, yarn over, and one more SSK, yarn over. So that now takes us to this center point, and we've got a knit through the back loop stitch right there. So that's that one here, and you can tell it's the right stitch because you can tell that this is the center point here. So we're just going to knit that one through the back loop, and then it sort of reverses. So we've got a yarn over, knit two together, and that's 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. So yarn over and knit two together. That's 1. Yarn over, knit two together. That's 2. Yarn over, knit two together. That's 3. And that leaves us with 1 stitch, which is correct. So we just knit that stitch. And I think by breaking it down like that into little chunks, I find that I don't overload my brain in trying to just think too much ahead. You know, if I know a lot of people like to be able to memorize their lace patterns, but I think when it's a little bit more complicated, I prefer not memorizing, because then all I'm doing is I'm thinking, right, I've got to do those 3 sets first of all, and then I'm doing the center stitch, and then I've got another 3 sets, and then I'll just do a quick check of my stitches. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. We are good to go. So I will finish off that round, and then I'll meet you back at round 14. Okay, so we're now on round 14. Now, this round and round 16, I think, contain what I've found to be the sort of trickiest stitch, which is this one here, is where we're decreasing 5 stitches to 1. So it's like a, what will that be, quadruple decrease? But we're going to do it slowly, and you'll see that actually when you break it down, you can do it and it's perfectly fine. It's not a problem. So we're going to start off here. We've got a knit one, and then we've got a knit front back. So knit one and then knit front back. Lovely. And now I'm going to just look at the stitches that are before that tricky one. So I've just got to do yarn over, SSK, yarn over. That's all I'm going to think about. So yarn over, SSK, and yarn over. So now we are at this one. It's actually quite fun. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to slip 3 stitches at the same time. So this, you know, it sounds tricky, and it can be tricky, but I'm going to do the same little trick that I did for my knit 3 together. So those next 3 stitches, I'm just going to loosen them off. So grab them like that and just give them a little wiggle. And now it's much easier to get my needle in. So knit-wise, we're slipping these. Grab them all at the same time like that and slip. Okay, we're now going to knit 2 together. And now what we've got to do is pass those 3 slip stitches over that one we've just done the knit 2 together on. The easiest way I've found of doing this is to pass them over one at a time. I think if you try and pass them over all at the same time, it could end in absolute disaster. So I've done it this way all the way through the first sock, and I've never had a problem. And also the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to really sort of not pull tightly, but put some tension on that stitch there, because we don't want that one flying off. So here are the 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3. That's our yarn over that we did in front of it. So I'm going to start with that one there. So grab hold of it, tension on that stitch and pass it over. And then the next one. No, split that one. Just, there we go. Pass that over. And then the third one. Pass that over. And we've completed it. We've now got 1 stitch where we had 5. Aren't we amazing? So now just to complete it off, we're going to do yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over. So I'm just going to concentrate on that bit. So yarn over, knit 2 together, yarn over, and then finally it's a knit front back. And we've got 2 stitches left, and we've got 2 left on the chart, so we know we are good. So let's just double check our stitch count again. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Perfect. So there we go. That's all of the stitches that you are going to use for your chart. Round 16, you can see, just uses that same decrease and then some knit front backs. The last thing I'm going to say is that what you might want to do, just in case you think you're not going to remember how to do those tricky stitches, you might want to just jot down next to the stitches here just exactly what you do, just in your own shorthand, just to remind yourself, just in case you think you're going to forget. So I'd maybe do that with that decrease, the central double decrease, and maybe the cluster stitch. All the rest, you know, you'll be absolutely fine with. So there we go. That's our chart. You can now go ahead and finish the leg of your sock. So I will see you back in the next video when we're going to be starting on the heel.